said just now that the Ethiopians dislike the Americans as a result of the Italians.
Yes, this is really shocking for me. Why?
Just wait. It's really wonderful. Don't you know the relation between Ethiopia and Italy?
Well, yes.
From 1936 to 1941. Would you mind telling me if you have come across it in your history? I don't think so you would. But let me hear it.
Oh, I like better if you speak. What do you learn in your school?
Do you mean
we don't learn very much about the very recent history in our school. We don't learn very much about the very recent history in our school.
You don't even know the countries you have tried to colonize.
Yes, I know this. And I think that they built many roads too in Europe, and I think that they did good things too.
Yeah, that's true. But don't you know what you did? I mean, didn't you learn in your history that what Italy did to Ethiopia? In what year? And when did they go out or things like that? Don't you come across?
Go on, tell us.
That's a fair question, Marcy. Tell us what you learned, or what you know about the Italian trouble with Ethiopia.
Oh, I don't know very much indeed. I think that perhaps I studied something about it, but now I forgot it.
Well, I'll be pleased to tell you if you haven't come across it in your history. Well, it should have been because you have been in my country for 5 years.
Yeah.
From 1936 to 1941.
Yes,
you came and bombarded our country, killed all of people, and did all sorts of things. And still you don't know the history of this thing. Well, luckily you were kicked out in 1941.
Well, Yilma,
yeah.
Maybe she doesn't know it because it's much more important to the Ethiopians than to the Italians.
Well, of course I admit, it might be as well important to know for her, I mean, what her country has done, what countries Italy dominated, no, what countries Italy tried to colonize. Don't you think that would at least be important to know what countries she colonized?
It would be a little important to them and very important to you.
It's very important to me and I know it well. And I have explained it to you.
I wonder if this raises a question that we ought to tackle. Is it a good thing that in schools today in 1958 you don't learn much about 1938? Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? And is it true of other events of the 1930s?
Well, I think it's a bad thing. I would like to know much more of our government, of our economy, and of all the things that are happening now in the world. In our school, we don't study this kind of thing. We just study history as far as I think the first World War.
Well, don't you ever get to study, for example, Italy under fascism and the Second World War?
Yes, I think that first I'm studying the things next year, I think, but I'm not sure.
But now, at 18, your history that you've studied in school has just brought you up to 1914.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't study current history, what kind of things do you study in school, Marcy? Now, I don't mean to be unkind, but you said that the Americans had a childish education and were completely uncultured. What do you learn in school?
Oh, we learn a lot of things which I don't know if they are very useful for us. Because, for instance, we in my school, I'm attending a classical school, and so we learn Greek and Latin, history and philosophy, and a lot of very old-fashioned things.
But you haven't really learned yet about the fascist period in Italy.
No, I think I'm learning something next year.
Well, now, what about in Ethiopia, Yilma? What have you learned in school about this period? Yeah.
As a matter of fact, we celebrate the day the Italians were kicked out every year. And I don't mean it's our independent day. We had our independence even before Christ, rather. And we just remember that date and just celebrate it. And of course, every individual in Ethiopia wouldn't ever forget what the Italians had done to us.
I'm sorry.
What the Italians do to us?
They killed many people, innumerable.
Why?
Well, he never.
They'd like to colonize our country, and we didn't let them do so. Well, we have to sacrifice so many bloods and things like that in order to keep the freedom of our country. Don't you think that's good?
Oh, yes, of course.
Perfectly true.
I guess.
Well, Rina, tell me about the education in your country. Do you learn really history up to date?
Well, I wouldn't say as up-to-date as in American schools, for in American schools they seem to know everything more about the present history than about the past. In American schools, they seem to know everything more about the present history than about the past. And yet I think perhaps in this atom age of ours, it's more important.